Documentary series, a multi-part series with dramatic impact of an event, individual, or situation of current cultural and or historical significance, or a creative, in-depth treatment of a topic presented in factual and informative manner. Can be filmed by one person or more. Must have debuted during the contest year, so previous year. Entry must contain a minimum of 3 installments with 5 seconds of black between episodes. Please do not submit your entire 10-hour series like the 3 or 4 best episodes of the series. Do not make any post edits. Each episode must be as it was originally presented. Entry will be weighted for both stellar photography and editing that elevates the presentation without distracting from the story and maximizes each episode. All right. All right, students. We'll start with this one first. Judges, feel free to turn off your cameras, or you guys can settle back, pull out your popcorn if you want, or your coffee, and we'll start off with the first one.
Is there sound? Can y'all hear the sound?
We cannot.
All right, let's go. 1 second. Let's go fix it.
Judges, while they're working on that, as soon as this is done, what we'll do is we'll go into discussion afterwards. We'll discuss what we liked, what we didn't like. Feel free to personally rank it. And then after we get done watching, I think in this category, there are 3, we can have an overall discussion, and then we'll rank them overall.
Thank you for bearing with us. We're bringing in the expert to help address the situation.
All good, Foster.
Like learning
we have it now.
tricks, or like picturing tricks that you couldn't do.
Sorry about that. Are we good to play it?
I think we're good here. Judges, we're good.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, sorry.
Like learning new tricks, or like picturing tricks that you couldn't do, and then staying there until you're a bloody pulp until you get it, and then just the victory, you know? That's in every board, that's in every piece I make. Like kids first kickflip, kids first ollie, just like that perseverance, that trying, that energy, like, and it was just gonna go in the trash. I've been skating since I was like 9 years old, so what, 32 years or something like that. Well, especially when I started, we were all freaks, you know what I'm saying? Skateboarding was still illegal, like it was associated with the dregs of society. Like I came from a place that really did not feed into skateboarding. I got trespassing tickets when I was like, 15, 14, like it was always a cool place to go skate behind City Hall in Marlborough, Massachusetts, where I grew up. I dropped out of college, freshman year of college, and I couldn't afford to go back, so I kind of just, you know, went here and there and just took whatever jobs I could so I could afford to live and skate. I felt like a lot of the places I worked for were just kind of like churning out whoever their employees were for a function, and then, you know, once they were used up, you know, they were done, next, you know. Even when I made that first block of recycled skateboards, it was crazy because like I was going through a lot of crap at the time where like my mom had passed away and I was super duper depressed. And so at one point my wife was just like, dude, you know, you need to go do something. So like the first thing I ever made was like a pendant out of skateboards for my wife. And like that literally like lit me up to like make whatever I could. If I saw anything out of wood, I was just like, can I make this out of skateboards, you know? Just that stoke, that natural like interest like finally came out of me that I never even experienced. And legitimately it was like out of nowhere, like a neon arrow being like, you should do this. In life, I've never really been told that I was doing good at anything before this. Like from other skaters, yeah, towards skating, but other than that, like, I failed, you know? To take this thing with a function that was thought to be over and to give it new life is to show like crazy love and respect for this thing in my heart, in my eyes, and like all that shit, you know? And it's crazy to like be able to give that to anything, you know? I learned so much in my life from skateboarding, the hard times, the good times, like how to dust yourself off in front of like a billion people after you fall and get up and keep trying and shit like that perseverance. Like it all comes from skating. Like life didn't teach me that. Like life taught me, like it suppressed my ass and told me to just take what I'm given and be cool with that. And like, you know, skateboarding was all like wall rides, you know, like legit. So like I want to ride on walls, and whether that's metaphorically with like what the things I make or like whatever, like I want to get crazy, I want to get buck, I want to get lit, I want to just like do whatever I can with it. I want to make the impossible possible, like anything that like I can think of that whatever, like I really am invigorated to make it out of skateboards. I mean, it's really, really crazy, but it's just nuts.
I think leather is one of those materials that changes through time, but it just keeps getting better and better. When I decided to start this as a company, which was not my original intention, this just happened organically. I just wanted to do something that brought back the feels of the product that was made in the past. Everything that was made in the past was made with very specific intention and care. The purpose of making it was very simple, you know, it was creating something that is functional, that is beautiful, and that lasts forever. My name is Gunther Estrada. I'm originally from Lima, Peru, and I live in Long Beach now, and I am a leather maker. Ever since I started skateboarding when I was 16 years old, there was this hope, this dream to come to America one day, to come to California with my brother. Because it was a dream to us to be part of this skate culture. When the opportunity to come over here as an exchange student came, I got approved to travel to the United States, and I came here in '97. I started working for different things, just trying to make a living, but always with the hopes of being part of that industry that I loved, you know, skateboarding. But it was not up until I started working for these issues when I finally reached my chance to grow into the industry. And that was when I started traveling with professional skaters and all that. So it was like kind of the dream came through in a different way, because originally it was more like being the skater, but it didn't happen. So it was more like in the back of the industry, helping professional skaters. With this group of people from DC, we became this artist collective that we call Los Garbage. In Peru, there is this way of calling or referring to your best friends as garbage, like basura. You yell, hey, basura. And that's why we call it Los Garbage, because we're best friends. From that point on, we started producing art with this group, and I started doing handles for knives and machetes and all that kind of stuff with recycled skateboards. And then we started doing art shows in Long Beach. I had this piece of leather just laying around in my living room, where I was supposed to do a knife sheath for one of the knives that I was doing. I saw that piece of leather and I decided that I needed a new wallet. And then just thinking how perhaps I can make my own. A few hours after I had my first card holder, after I trip I did to Prague, just me being there, that place is so beautiful and so old, you know. I saw that, I realized that everything that is there is all like made to perfection, you know, with that same purpose that I was thinking to build my product under, which is, you know, functionality, beauty, and just durability, you know. And it was like, oh, maybe I can do that. I can make something that could last forever, that could last generations. And that's how, I mean, I came up with that slogan called Hasta la Muerte, which is till death. I always have that Peruvian feeling with me everywhere I am. So I guess my culture is in everything I make, because it's just who I am. Hasta la Muerte, I kept it in Spanish, not because it's something that some people might understand, but it's important because it's something that you can share with someone and explain the reasoning behind it. This sense of accomplishment that I guess I used to get when I used to skate when I was young, you know. I've done something good. The same is with leather, you know. When I finish something, when I finish a product, and I'm happy with it because it's exactly how I thought it would be, it's just full gratification. I feel complete that day.
I was always told not to talk about my immigration status, and I was told to be silent about a lot of my identities, whether it was overtly or not. Being Christian, you're not supposed to be queer, which is part of the reason why I make the jewelry that I do now that states it so clearly. My name is Amy Solis, and I am a maker of small objects. I make necklaces, pins, brooches, earrings, objects that have to do with gender identity or other parts of of my own identity or the identity of my community. So I am queer and I am undocumented. When I was 6 years old, my mother and my brother and I migrated to the US. We lived most of our childhood in Riverside. It was very conservative, very Christian. Both of my grandfathers were pastors. I think I always knew that I didn't fit into heteronormativity. I didn't have the language for it until college. I wasn't out about my immigration status. I thought I would get kicked out of school or that I would have to start paying out-of-state tuition. I couldn't get financial aid, so I didn't talk about it until there was a rally. It was like a undocumented students rally, and somebody was just on a microphone just being like, I'm undocumented and I don't care if you know, and it blew my mind. I was so surprised that somebody was so okay with disclosing that and they were safe. So I felt a little bit more open about it after that. I started making the jewelry that I make now in the early pandemic. I was feeling like my craft that I was working on before wasn't really lining up with my activism work or really my values. The pandemic really forced me to sit down and think about what I wanted my stuff to say and do. I wanted my craft to feel like it was part of my identity. So I started making those up there. The one that says Wawa Chuyita. Wawa is a child, but in Ecuador it's sort of like a slang word. Chuyita is a creative person from Ecuador. For me, like I was saying, it was such a secret to be all these things that I don't know, I imagine it was that difficult for other people too, and maybe some immigrant kid that's like struggling because they've been also told to be silent about their identity their whole life, or that queer person that's also religious that's been told to not be that way. Then it shows that we exist and we're okay, we're alive, and not alone. If somebody finds this random piece of metal that says they, them in maybe 80 years, and they say, what is they, them? Why would you have to use that? Then I've succeeded, I guess. It just gives me hope to know that someday these things won't matter anymore because we're beyond it, and they can be melted down and become something new.
All right. We can go back out of screen share mode, or actually, do you guys just want to stay in that? That way, just in case there's any audio issues, we could all see each other, right? On the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just go around the horn real quick. Just give me your critiques of it, what you liked, what you didn't like, and we'll go in reverse this time. We'll start off with Thompson. I'm going to just call you guys by your last name. That'll be easiest.
Cool.
some of the things I noticed, I liked that there was, in the interview setups, there was some color in the background and there was consistency across the series. So I think it's good to look for, what is it that ties the series together and kind of has that like bigger perspective. So I thought that was a thoughtful touch. I thought all of the characters had really, they were all makers. They were all really gifted in their craft, but the series dived in deeper into more about who they are and what makes them tick rather than, just what they make. So I thought it was a nice deep dive into like who these people are. I'm going to stop there. I don't want to cover everything that was cool about them, right? I guess I want to leave some space for all of us to share. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nathan. O'Neill.
Yeah, I think kind of springboarding off that, there was this kind of sense of, I guess, the juxtaposition between the video, what was being shown, and this cross section of life and their craft. And it was interesting because you didn't have to be so blaringly obvious, showing pictures of their experiences or their life. There was almost this kind of subcontext kind of level of the video in certain areas where they were speaking, the characters were speaking, but then the video almost complemented it in a deeper level, which I really did appreciate. And I think I liked, at least from the producing side of it, each kind of mini series piece started out with this kind of really just kind of, generalized kind of open montage that kind of just gets you into it before they hit the title slide. And I did like that it was kind of consistent with each piece in that way. But yeah, those are just kind of my first thoughts.
Nice. Thank you. Priya?
Yeah, I mean, I too noticed the sort of consistency across the series. I thought that was really important. And then the point that both Nates made about sort of the juxtaposition of characters and who these people were, and then showing the creative process. I thought their narration by each person was a really smart way to do that. And two of them I just found really compelling, and sort of hearing them tell their own stories. Visually, I really appreciated the editing in this one, and also just the close-ups of, when you're narrating something about a creative process. I thought the close-up shots of, you can, actually see sort of the intricacies of what they were doing, particularly in the final segment, was pretty strong, I thought.
Awesome. And Raquel?
Yeah, I'd have to basically mirror what everybody has said thus far. The things that stood out to me the most, again, were the consistency throughout each of the episodes. The editing was smart. It kept me engaged throughout. The first one was a great starter one, I think. I think it was very intimate, and there was a rawness when you'd hear his, voice shake when he was almost kind of about to cry because he was so passionate about what he was doing. And it kind of just felt like I was hanging out with these people, which I also really enjoyed. Like, there was nothing other than just them telling their story, and you could tell they were comfortable to tell it. And, sometimes it can be a little bit long-winded when you're just listening to somebody or watching somebody speak. So I like that they had a lot of visuals to support and to complement and to keep you engaged throughout. Yeah, it was great.
Awesome. Before we get into the next one, again, just kind of find your own little tally system. If you want to, however you want to rank it, like we could stick to the 1 through 5, but just kind of give your own little tally. It may change as you watch other pieces. Try and rank them individually on their own merits, and then we'll come back at the end and we'll see how everyone, what the consensus is, and we'll go from there. But just want to, as you're watching these pieces, keep that in mind. All right, Foster and Aisha, I guess we could go to the next one.
That one being the climate crisis CNN.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you for calling CNN.
I feel all sorry for all the people that are in the industry of oil and gas, coal, because we are all going to lose our jobs. The town that I live in Gillette, Wyoming is oil and gas related, and everybody in this town is afraid that it's going to become a ghost town because of what Biden wants to do. Thank you. Bye.
Steven?
Howdy.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Mind if we come in?
Oh, come on in.
So, Steve, tell me what led you to leave this voicemail.
I just was upset about the election. I didn't like what Biden was going to do, and I was concerned about the jobs and my job.
This is Steve Gray. He drives workers to coal mines and rail yards, and he says he's been laid off from multiple jobs in the oil and coal industries.
I figured, well, yeah, I'm going to call, I'll never get any return, but it'd make me feel better. And then when you called me, I was like, okay, what did I get myself into now?
Gillette, Wyoming calls itself the energy capital of the nation. It's the hub of a region that produces roughly 40% of U.S. coal. If you live in one of these states, there's a pretty good chance that when you hit the light switch, your power originated here.
We have, as a policy, as a nation, basically created Gillette into what it is today.
The United States actually owns much of this land and has used various incentives and regulations to help will Gillette into existence.
There is an ownership interest literally on behalf of you and me.
So as coal use declines because of markets and the climate crisis, what responsibility do we have to Steve and other fossil fuel workers?
I would think a lot of people's idea was say, well, they'll just have to figure it out. But I do feel that, we did provide energy to the country for 40 years. I think there would be a benefit to help us transition into other industries or something else. We have so much here that to abandon it would be abandoning millions and billions of dollars.
I put Gray's question to the mayor. Will Gillette become a ghost town?
Well, I sure hope not, and I feel we are doing what we can so that doesn't happen. It's just a fact that coal production and the sale of coal is going down. We just have to realize that Gillette can't be as dependent on the fossil fuel industry like we have been.
Gillette sits on top of the Powder River Basin, which is a massive deposit of coal. Small mines popped up in the early years, and then the town boomed in the 1970s.
These mines, these miners, the people of this region have powered our nation for the last 50 years. The amount that has been mined and shipped and burnt for power is really mind-boggling. They believe in what they do, and you hate to see that diminished by factors that are really out of their control.
In recent years, as natural gas boomed, coal in Wyoming went bust.
Now put it on, right?
President Trump tried to roll back environmental regulations and to bring back coal, but ultimately he couldn't stop the decline.
I guess I was kind of a little disappointed. Now whether it was all his fault or what happened, I don't know.
Hundreds of coal miners are out of their jobs. The Black Jewel Mining Company in Gillette unexpectedly shut down yesterday, locking out nearly 600 workers.
If I'm not driving, hauling these guys back and forth to their trains, I'm not getting paid. And as you can see with all these locomotives all lined up out here, that, how bad it is. Didn't need as many trains to haul out all this coal. So they all brought them all out here. 95% of them were all in use. And it just keeps growing and growing. I lost pickups, got a divorce, bank accounts were drained, lost my house, all the repossessions. So it was tough.
This is a painful reality, but it's also true that burning coal contributes massively to global warming, more than any other way of making electricity. US President Joe Biden realizes this.
Good afternoon.
And he's pledged to cut carbon pollution rapidly.
We're going to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord as of today.
And Biden has signaled plans to make the electric grid 100% clean in the next 15 years. Essentially, that means no more burning coal. The mayor of Gillette says she's in favor of the Paris Agreement, and she understands the science of climate change.
President-elect Biden said he will work with the red states and the blue states, and I have no reason to doubt he won't keep his word.
To stop Gillette from disappearing, she and other community leaders are looking for a future that goes beyond burning coal. One of those visions, perhaps ironically, sits at the foot of a coal-fired power plant on the north end of town.
And our goal here really is to try to commercialize those technologies that can reduce carbon from the atmosphere, but yet allows our major power plants, our railroads, and our coal mines to continue to operate.
The idea is to capture planet-warming emissions before they enter the atmosphere and to store them deep in the ground.
12.5% of what is going up and out of that stack is carbon dioxide, and so we need to concentrate and pull that 12.5% out to then do something with it. You know, if we find a technology here at the ITC that can be used globally, we'll do more to combat global carbon emissions than just somebody saying you can't operate a coal plant in our state.
But this technology is expensive and it's unproven on an industrial scale. Many environmentalists aren't sold.
A lot of it is too little too late, honestly. I mean, carbon capture in particular is something that's been talked about for over a decade now. It's something that has never really attracted the utilities to be on the table. And the reason is it's very expensive. And when you have lower cost renewable energy available, very widespread across the country, you don't need to have carbon capture at a coal plant.
South of Gillette, there's another vision for the energy future.
Pacific Core has been investing more into renewables due to our customers' demands.
Wyoming is one of the windiest states in the country, yet it's been somewhat hesitant to embrace this industry. And it's also one of the only states that taxes wind power, rather than creating incentives.
Wyoming is conflicted on renewables, and partly because we get so much revenue from the mineral industry, and renewables are seen as a threat to that industry.
Hard as it may try, Gillette likely won't be able to make the transition away from fossil fuels on its own. The truth is that many mining communities, especially the smaller ones, they do end up becoming ghost towns.
It's easy to look around the country and see those communities where major industry just up and left. You know, Appalachia has a lot of lessons, and the last thing that we want to do is to become another story like that.
The Biden administration ran on the promise of climate-friendly jobs, including a so-called just transition for fossil fuel workers, like those in Gillette.
It'll be the greatest spur to job creation and economic competitiveness in the 21st century.
This county is as red as they come. Almost 90% voted against President Biden in 2020. But now, they may need his help.
Look at all these businesses around here. Where are all these people going to go for jobs? What's going to happen to everybody? I don't like asking for government assistance. It's degrading to myself, you know, where I have to ask somebody for help. I mean, I don't like it myself, but, you know, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do.
Thank you for calling CNN.
Hi, my name is Lily Geisler. My question is regarding recycling, and I basically just wanted to see where all of the recycling goes.
This is Lily. She's a recent college grad in Muncie, Indiana. She called CNN in part because she goes to a lot of trouble to recycle plastic. First, she emails the city, waits for coupons to come in the mail, goes to a store and exchanges those coupons for blue bags, fills those blue bags with plastic, and then drives them across town.
I would like to believe that things are being properly taken care of. The optimist in me, but I'm not sure if what I think I'm doing is actually what's being done.
I came to Muncie to try to answer Lily's question. Where does her plastic go, and are her recycling efforts worth it?
I live on the west side of town, and the recycling center is all the way 15 minutes on the east side of town. I feel like even though it's kind of a hassle for me, that I am ultimately making a difference.
I'd like to show Lily what happens after she drops off her plastic at this recycling center, but the company that runs it, Best Way Disposal, declined a request for a tour and an on-camera interview. Where her recycling is going, and I'm trying to figure out the answer to that question. The Muncie Sanitary District also declined our requests. No one has been willing to tell us what is actually happening with the stuff that she puts in that blue bag. The city's mayor touts Muncie's Do the Blue campaign, which asks residents to put all of their plastics and other recyclables into one bag.
These are the blue bags. We get them out to as many people as we can. They can throw any one of their recyclable items into the blue bag.
Are all of those items getting recycled, or do some of them actually end up in a landfill?
No, they're all getting recycled. They're all getting, if they're in the blue bag, they're going to figure out what to do with them.
Best Way accepts all types of plastic, but in an email, the company says there's not a market for all of those plastics, and some of them go straight to the landfill.
For a long time, people just kind of put their recyclables in their recycling bin and just thought, hey, you know, hope for the best, and thought this must be being turned into something else. It's good that we're talking about it a lot more, because so much of it, especially the low value plastics, aren't actually being recycled into something else. We need to have a lot more transparency about where this material goes.
It's helpful to think about recycling as a market. Some plastics, like water bottles and milk jugs, they're valuable.
The rest of the plastics, we call them 3 through 7s. Those sell for sometimes negative $17 a ton. There isn't someone that really wants to buy those and turn them into another product.
To understand this, you need to know a little something about plastics history. For decades now, plastics companies and others have flooded American television with ads that advocates say contain a misleading message. It's okay to use plastic, as long as you recycle.
What do you think he's doing with that bottle?
Oh no, he's gonna throw it in the trash. I can't look.
Wait. He's putting it in his bag to recycle later.
Way to go, Mr. Brown Shoes.
Bravo, sir, bravo.
The way the industry was created was to sort of be this consumer get-out-of-jail-free card. It was literally driven by the plastics industry, but it was never intended to be functional.
A Frontline and NPR investigation uncovered years of communications showing plastics industry executives knew that recycling wouldn't actually solve this problem.
There was never an enthusiastic belief that recycling was ultimately going to work in a significant way.
Advocates say the 7-number labeling system for plastics only confuses consumers further. This symbol doesn't necessarily mean the packaging will be recycled.
It's a marketing campaign meant to make plastic look like it's more of an environmental product than it actually is. The real truth is arrows don't mean anything about the recyclability of a product.
A spokesperson for the Plastics Industry Association denied it was misleading, saying these symbols never were intended as a consumer education system. The group declined an interview request but defended recycling in an email to CNN. Giving up on recycling with no alternative path forward is extremely short-sighted. The association says the plastics industry supports clearer labeling and will, quote, continue to invest in technologies and improvements to increase the amount of material collected, recycled, and ultimately put back into products. Experts tell us there are 2 important factors that determine whether a product will actually be recycled. First, the type of plastic. 1s and 2s generally get recycled, and sometimes 5s if you're lucky. But also the shape of the plastic matters. If it's a bottle or jug, then it's likely to be recycled. After that, there's a good chance that your plastic is headed to the landfill. Muncie advertises that it accepts plastics 1 through 7. Lily didn't realize that only numbers 1 and 2 are actually recycled.
Kind of interesting that they're only doing a relatively small portion of what they say they're doing.
What do you think of that as someone who's putting a lot of effort into recycling here?
There isn't like completely full truth.
The big picture is stark. Less than 10% of plastic ever manufactured has actually been recycled. Global plastic production is expected to triple by 2050, and one study says plastic in the ocean could outweigh the ocean's fish.
Get about 400 tons of material a day. So about 100,000 tons of material a year gets sorted through this facility. So there's probably 1 million plastic bottles right now in that pile.
Kate Davenport is co-founder of Eureka, a nonprofit recycler in Minneapolis.
I think we particularly have a plastics packaging problem. We're using a lot of packaging for one-time usage.
Advocates say the conversation needs to shift from individual recycling efforts to putting pressure on the industry that produces these mountains of plastic.
We think there needs to be standards and accountability around packaging held onto the producers that are making the packaging. We can't put all the pressure on the consumer to figure all of this out. It's too much, it's too confusing.
Reduce, reuse, and recycle.
I'll keep this.
Advocates say that recycling is the last and least important of the three.
So reducing the amount of materials you consume is the most resource efficient, greenest thing you can do.
It's a message Lily takes to heart.
It's completely inevitable to come across plastic. I mean, you go to the store and there's plastic everywhere. We're being told that all of this is being reused when it's really not. I hope that this helps people be a lot more mindful of how much plastic and single-use items they're using.
Thank you for calling CNN.
I'm Tracy. I'm calling from the foothills of Northern California. I'm calling because I've been sitting with the danger of living in California given the fires. We've been considering actually leaving our home, not wanting to spend summers filled with smoke. The big question I have is, if not here, where?
Tracy and her 5-year-old granddaughter live near the wildfires that have ripped across California in recent years.
My son, luckily, was visiting and staying with me for a while and woke me up at 2 o'clock in the morning and said, "Mom, I smell smoke." A lot of smoke, and I went outside and it was just thick. You couldn't breathe. The whole sky across the pond went red. And so I grabbed the baby at the time and the dog and a couple of important things, my laptop, and jumped in the truck and ran.
Her family evacuated safely and the house survived, but the worsening fires, which scientists link to the climate crisis, make Tracy worry about her granddaughter's future. She wants to leave.
I had always planned to live and die here. I didn't plan on moving again. You know, I'm lucky that I have a choice to go someplace else, but, you know, then the question becomes, well, where?
It's just a reality that some people are going to have no other option but to move. It's unfortunate, but it's a reality.
Nowhere is unaffected, but researchers like Jesse Keenan have started looking at places of so-called climate refuge, which may prove to be more resilient as humans continue to pollute the atmosphere and warm the climate.
Certainly this is on the scale of the Great Dust Bowl and the migration that came along with that. There's too many unknowns, but we do recognize that this is in the order of millions of people.
Keenan says there's one American city he believes is particularly well positioned to become a refuge for climate migrants like Tracy. That city? Duluth, Minnesota.
We are known as the San Francisco of the North. I'll let you decide if you think that's true.
I traveled to Duluth, and I did so a little skeptically. I've reported on climate migration for years, usually from locations like Honduras, Puerto Rico, the Marshall Islands, places where people are being pushed out of their home. Was there another and less visible migration already underway? One in which people are choosing sites of refuge?
You know, a handful of years ago, I would have thought, that's a one-off. It is much more common now.
Duluth is embracing the idea of itself as a climate safe haven.
It feels really sad to me that we are at a place and a stage that people are actually considering abandoning the history of who they've been, of who their family's been, of where they've lived, and actually choosing to leave that. And at the same time, if that means that people can find that and build that narrative for themselves here in Duluth, it's an extraordinary place, and we do want to be that for people.
The city's climate and geography are part of the reason that some scientists say Duluth will fare better than most. Duluth is known for its sub-zero temperatures, which are getting a little warmer. It's far from the coasts, and there's one other huge reason.
Lake Superior is the largest of the North American Great Lakes. It contains about 10% of the liquid fresh water on the planet. The shifts that we've seen in climate, some of them I think arguably make it a little more pleasant. Warmer winters is not entirely unwelcome.
Local Indigenous leaders near Duluth are concerned that a wave of climate migrants could further degrade the land and threaten their rights.
If you think northern Minnesota is beautiful, you're right. We welcome you. If you are going to come here, then you need to support us as Indigenous people so that your climate solution doesn't end up in our cultural and spiritual genocide. This is treaty area for the Fond du Lac Band. And once again, we are going to bear the brunt of colonization. These will be new colonizers coming to the area. They're going to come here for reasons that have nothing to do with anything that tribal people have done.
People have been moved and removed from land for centuries. And so this concept of adding that kind of historical trauma into the conversation just makes it very, very complicated.
If you're coming for the clean water, can we still promise you clean water with 50,000 or 100,000 more people? Can we promise we're going to have a quality school or, an adaptable economy that meets everybody's needs? Don't kill the thing you love, and you can't stop individuals from doing it, but you can plan for it.
For now, Keenan and other researchers say many Americans are continuing to move toward the places that we know are becoming more dangerous. Toward the coast or toward the Southwest, for example, which is becoming more arid. But a few climate migrants are showing up in Duluth already. Did you consider yourself a climate migrant?
Yeah, I do. I think that's really hard to say, because I think on some level it sounds like we're giving up on California.
Jamie Alexander fled San Francisco with her husband and 2 children, unsure where to go, but certain that they couldn't stay for another wildfire season.
The 2018 Camp Fire happened, and that really changed everything for me. Our home didn't feel habitable to us anymore.
They miss San Francisco, but Alexander says Duluth has welcomed her family, and she couldn't be more grateful.
We are all sort of in this unknown together. There's no guidebook for this, and I found that really disconcerting, but also I think it helps us see our shared humanity in all of this.
I called up Tracy, whose message launched this trip, to see what she would make of this. What do you think about Duluth, Minnesota?
I'll go look. Maybe it's closer to San Francisco now than I realized. If so, that would be wonderful. Anywhere up north is cold, so it's not about the cold, it's really the culture.
She plans to move in the coming year.
I'm definitely going. I've decided we're going.
Still, she's not sure exactly where she'll go.
There's going to be a lot of work to be done no matter where that place is. So whether you stay or go, I think that, the work is very similar that we all have to do in how we live independently and together.
All right. We'll start off here this time with Priya, and then we'll go O'Neill, Raquel, and then Thompson. Priya, if you want to kick it off.
Yeah, so my initial thoughts, I thought it was really a smart idea for a series actually, to do this, to do a series on sort of answering people's voicemails and doing sort of like a deep dive on their questions. I thought the local look in the first one particularly, and also in the last installation, the local look on sort of like the impact of the climate crisis was also really smart. Critiques visually, for me, this wasn't the most compelling in terms of, showing the sort of impact of the climate crisis. And the interviews, some of them were quite good, but some weren't as compelling. But overall, I just thought this was like a really interesting and smart strategy for sort of like a different take on climate.
I guess I'll jump in now. Yeah, I kind of agree with Priya's initial thoughts as far as some of the visuals weren't as strong as they could have been. Particularly for me, I felt like some of the characters that were introduced, there was a little bit of lack of the documentation of their lives, and that could have been brought forward a little bit more to highlight how these climate crises are impacting them at their personal level. I did think the drone video was pretty compelling, as far as showing the scope of some of the images where they're talking about, I believe it was like the train tracks and all of the unused trains that are sitting there. That's a visual that you wouldn't necessarily get from the ground. And then from the landfills, similar kind of idea. And then just one last note that I had was, I thought the graphical animations did help for some of the trends that they were talking about and the data to visualize that. I think maybe it was in the first piece, it was a little hard to follow as far as the colors and which states were affected. But I like the idea at least of visualizing something as far as, the nationwide impact.
Raquel?
Yeah, again, I also want to mirror what Priya and Nathan said. I did like I really liked the idea. I liked that they actually went and talked to who the caller was, and we got to meet the caller and kind of the why behind that. Visually, again, I like nothing really made me go, whoa, and like really want to like look. I feel like they're kind of things that we see all the time on CNN and places like that. It's kind of that same visual aesthetic. But I did also enjoy this hint of solutions journalism that I'm seeing. Like, it's not just presenting the problem, it's presenting how a community is moving forward and creating their own solutions. So that part was actually inspiring for me, but I do agree that it could have gone a little deeper. It could have, I get that there's short segments, but it was overall good. It was fun to watch.
And Thompson.
Yeah, I liked that, they're covering big issues from multiple angles.
I thought it was cool that they, in the Wyoming story, they talked about how this community is kind of, falling apart, and it's like, where do they go in the future? I thought that they did a nice job there of showing the impact on a group of people that, we might not know about. And then I also liked that the scope of it felt big when they also talked about the carbon capture, and it's like, okay, well, is this a possible solution that could solve this problem and kind of help keep this community kicking? And then they had the opposing position to that and saying, it's kind of too late for this. So I liked all the different angles, particularly in the first story. I thought some of the drone shots, like Nate said, of the flyovers of the trains, like the reveal from the smokestacks, flying over the smokestacks. There was one shot like flying under a bridge, was all particularly compelling. Some of the stories, especially the second and third story, I kind of got lost. I'm like, is this just CNN file footage, or is this like tailored to the particular story? So, I feel like in the first series, you could really tell, oh, this is like video captured only for this story. So when it just gets to feeling a little bit more like file, maybe I just don't quite connect with it as much. Yeah.
My favorite part was the squirrels talking to each other, for sure. We're gonna take a 5-10 minute break, a coffee break, restroom break. Aisha and Foster, I'm going to open it up to all the judges too. I'm going to be pretty transparent here. This third entry one, it's 3 parts. First 2 parts, it's 30 minutes, then 50 minutes. The third part, they submitted it as a link, and it is behind a paywall, so I can't view it. And so, for series, it is obviously a minimum of 3 parts, and we're only able to view 2. So I've sent a message to AJ and Mark for guidance, but I want to ask the judges also your opinions on this. If that is your opinion, if this is a DQ, or if you would like to judge it just on 2 parts. Again, I want to make sure that I'm within the rules here as well. So they did submit 3, but it's behind a paywall. So I'd love to hear the judges' thoughts while I await a response from AJ and Mark.
I had my mic open, so I guess I'll chime in. I guess since they submitted 3, if we can access it, then we should probably watch it.
Okay. Yeah, share your personal ranking, likes, dislikes, reasons for it, and then we'll move through it, and then we'll kind of go from there. We will start this time with Nathan O'Neill.
Sure. And in terms of like ranking, we're going to say like number 1 and number 2. Is that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Who you pick for first and second?
Gotcha. Okay. Well, so I think personally for me, I feel the entry from In the Studio was my number 1. I think it was overall complete visually, character driven, and I didn't see any elements where there was room for improvement or I felt like there was something lacking. Whereas in the Climate Crisis series, I think we all kind of agreed that there was elements where the visuals just weren't as stunning or impressive for certain parts of the series. So for that reason alone, that's my number 1 and 2.
Right. Raquel.
I'd have to agree with Nathan that instinctually the first pick for me was the In the Studio. It just felt the most visually engaging, and also just in a very short amount of time I was engaged in these people's stories. The only thing that kind of has me wrestling is that with the CNN Climate Crisis one, I'm such a fan of solutions journalism. I love when people take it beyond the problem. And so, immediately I want to highlight that. But if we're just looking at the visuals, I do think that the In the Studio was more successful, and I would probably have them be number one and then CNN number two.
Okay. Thompson.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I really like the scope of the CNN series. In the Studio, I really wish they would have pushed a little more to, and even visually, just see these people outside of their studio. I know it's just called In the Studio, isn't it? But I felt because it was so focused on just like close-ups all the time of like what they're making, I felt like it lacked some visual depth. Whereas the Climate Crisis series had, you know, impressive drone shots. It was following people. There was a section where there were gimbal shots following, you know, some of the firefighters that I think were absolutely stunning. Rarely do I see that type of production value, you know, in a crisis environment, to have like a Steadicam style look in a crisis environment. Again, I have no way to like know if that's file video or not, but when I saw it, I was like, wow, that stuff looked awesome. And they just covered so many different like areas. You could tell they're traveling all over the place. And I know that's more on the producing side, but that means, you know, the video crew, you know, puts in that effort to make that scope larger. So my number one would be the Climate Crisis.
Rhea, comes down to you.
For me, I would agree with Nate and Raquel in putting In the Studio first, just because to me it felt more visually engaging, and I thought the edit was quite smart. And holistically, the sort of characters combined with the visuals just felt more holistically sort of sound in terms of like packaging a story together. I do want to agree though with Raquel's point of solutions driven journalism. I thought that was really a great point to make, and I too would concur with that. And again, I thought that the sort of idea for the series and answering people's emails and then doing sort of like a local look on like the impact on a community, as I think Nathan brought up for the sort of first segment of the climate series, was really compelling and interesting, and there's a lot of sort of news value there. But again, some of it did feel like it was file footage and just sort of things that they pulled from previously shot footage. So holistically and also with a weighty focus on visuals, I would still put In the Studio first and the CNN climate series second.
So it sounds like we have 3 for In the Studio, 1 for climate. So first place I think goes to In the Studio, and second place would be for climate. Great job, judges. This is awesome discussion.